They say the sky and the freest place on earth. But that night, for Marcus Cole and his wife, Dr. Lila Monroe, the sky became a cage made of prejudice. Apex Airways Flight 112, Houston to Paris, was supposed to be the beginning of their 15th anniversary getaway. 2 Polaris class tickets, seats 2A and 2B, champagne, soft golden light, and the rare feeling of letting go of work to just be 2 people beneath the stars. But at 30, 5,000 feet, something terrible was about to happen. Something that would shake the entire aviation industry. At George Bush International Airport, the familiar symphony of travel filled the air, the sound of rolling suitcases, announcements over the loudspeakers, the mingling scent of coffee and metal. Yet for Marcus, today was different. It wasn't a business trip, not an inspection, just a man learning how to rest. At 50, his hair was streaked with grey, his frame strong, his eyes sharp and observant like radar. He didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. His presence was enough. 20 years at the Federal Aviation Administration had forged in him a calm that thrived amid chaos. He was the kind of man who could ground an entire fleet with a single signature. But tonight, all of that was set aside. There was only the woman he loved. Lila Monroe, 46, intelligent, composed, and beautiful in the kind of way that made others feel at ease. An aeromedical specialist and doctor of aerospace medicine, she was one of the leading experts in crew psychology. For 2 decades, she had written procedures that kept passengers safe and flight attendants steady, saving lives with nothing more than her pen. But today, she just wanted to be Lila, the wife, the companion, not Dr. Monroe, buried in endless reports. "You ready?" Marcus asked softly, his hand closing around hers as they approached the first-class boarding gate. Lila smiled. 2 weeks without emails, meetings, or reports. Sounds like a miracle. Marcus chuckled. "I'll try not to run a safety check before takeoff." They both laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that carried like a pocket of calm in the noise of the world. They didn't know that within hours, the very protocols they had spent years defending would be trampled right before their eyes. As boarding began, a few glances turned their way, curious, assessing. They were used to that. But the woman standing at the aircraft door, lead flight attendant Paige Turner, wasn't just curious. She was judging them, as if they had walked into a place they didn't belong. "Welcome aboard, Apex 112, Paige said smoothly. Marcus handed her their tickets. "Seats 2A and 2B. Paige looked down at the tickets, then up at them. Her eyes narrowed for just a fraction of a second, quickly enough to pass, yet long enough to change the air around them. The metal door closed behind them, sealing them off from the world below. Marcus leaned back into the deep blue leather seat, trying to shake the odd feeling left by the attendant's gaze. But in his line of work, he knew one thing for certain. When someone starts to judge you at 35,000 feet, things can fall faster than any aircraft. The flight had begun, and no one in the first-class cabin realized that the 2 people who had just taken their seats were the very ones who could make the entire airline bow its head. The Polaris cabin of Apex Airways felt like another world, luxurious, silent, sealed away from the noise and breath of life outside. Each suite was a private cocoon, lined with deep blue leather, the soft lights casting a golden shimmer across their champagne glasses. Marcus Cole leaned back and drew a deep breath, trying to let himself relax, a rare act for a man whose life had been shaped by control and discipline. Beside him, Lila Monroe slipped off her heels and carefully tucked her small handbag into the side compartment. The light reflected in her eyes, clear as water beneath the wing. 15 years together, countless separations for duty, flights that crossed in opposite directions, and now, at last, a journey that belonged only to them. "You know," Lila said softly, her voice blending with the distant hum of the engines, "when I write procedures for flight crews, I always think, if one day they start seeing passengers as people instead of problems, then the skies might finally be safe." Marcus tilted his head, studying his wife. "And you think that day is near?" "I used to," she replied with a faint, bittersweet smile. "But I still see those same looks, like the one earlier." He didn't answer, only tightened his hold on her hand. A faint unease crept into Marcus's chest. He had heard hundreds of explanations from flight crews after incidents. The passenger was uncooperative. We felt threatened. He knew better than anyone how thin the line was between security and prejudice. But he had never imagined he would one day be on the other side of it. A soft tapping sound pulled him back to the present, the click of fingernails against metal. Paige Turner appeared, her smile textbook perfect, but her eyes wandering somewhere else. She carried a silver tray with 2 flutes of champagne. "Welcome champagne, sir, ma'am." Lila nodded politely. "Thank you." Paige set the glasses down, her eyes flicking quickly over Lila's simple dress and Marcus's understated suit. A moment of quiet comparison passed through her mind. Not the first-class type. Her forced smile made it too obvious. "Have you two flown Apex Polaris before?" Marcus replied evenly. "Yes, many times." "Oh, wonderful," she said, her smile freezing slightly. "Sometimes we have last-minute upgrades, passengers who aren't familiar with the seat system, so I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable." A normal sentence, but sharp as a blade. One look, one tone, said everything. "You don't belong here." Lila took a sip of champagne, the sweetness fading slowly down her throat. "Thank you for your concern," she said softly, her voice gentle but steady. "We're fine, Paige." As Paige walked away, Marcus saw her lean down to whisper something to the silver-haired man at the front of the cabin. Victor Halverson, the purser. They exchanged a few words, then both glanced in his direction. In Victor's eyes, there was a flicker of suspicion, followed by a hardening. Marcus felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with certainty. He knew exactly what was beginning. He had read reports like this hundreds of times, and now he was living one. He turned to Lila. "If I'm right, we might be about to witness a very real case study." She looked at him, instantly understanding. "You're serious?" "I'm speaking as an inspector," Marcus said quietly, his voice low and certain, almost prophetic. "And I think they're about to make the biggest mistake of their lives." At the front of the aircraft, Victor Halverson set down his cup of coffee and glanced at the softly glowing cabin screen. On it, the name of the passenger in seat 2A appeared, Marcus Cole. The name was familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. If only he had remembered, everything might have stopped right there. The Polaris cabin was so quiet one could hear the soft pull of a leather zipper or the gentle pour of champagne into crystal glasses. For most passengers, those sounds meant luxury. But for Marcus Cole, they felt like the sounds of an experiment, where every gaze was a microscope trained on him. He caught the look of Victor Halverson from the front of the cabin, a man with neatly combed silver hair, a perfectly pressed uniform, and a smile straight from the handbook. Yet behind that polished exterior lay something else, a cold and quiet suspicion. A man like Victor had served tens of thousands of passengers in his lifetime, and he believed he could read people. The problem was, what guided him today wasn't experience but prejudice. Lila felt the shift in the air, her polite smile fading. "You can tell they're talking about us, can't you?" she whispered. Marcus nodded slightly, eyes fixed ahead. "Yeah, they think we got upgraded." The words sounded casual, but his tone was dry and sharp, as if this was no longer a vacation, but a live field test. The cabin door closed, and the aircraft prepared for pushback. Paige returned, holding a small notepad and a smile that was now only a mask. "Sir, ma'am, we're just double, checking the passenger list for Polaris. May I see your boarding passes again?" Lila looked up, a little surprised. "We already scanned them at the gate." "Yes, just for verification, that's all." Marcus handed over the tickets, his voice calm. "Seats 2A and 2B." Paige nodded, but instead of leaving, she held the passes a moment longer than necessary. Then, as if deciding something, she turned and walked briskly toward the front of the cabin. Marcus saw her lean down to whisper to Victor. Both looked in their direction before Victor began walking over. "Good evening," he said, his voice deep, polite, but rigid. "I'm Victor Halverson, purser of this flight. I need to re-verify your seat information. Verify your—" Marcus leaned forward slightly, meeting his gaze. "Is there a problem, Mr. Halverson?" "Just a small system error. It appears these 2 seats may have been assigned to other passengers." "There must have been a mix up at the gate," Lila said gently, her tone still composed. "Perhaps," Victor replied, though his eyes had lost their warmth. "I'll need to see proof of purchase or your booking confirmation email." A few passengers nearby lifted their heads, curiosity stirring. The air grew heavy. Marcus could feel the mix of confusion and judgment from the others. In such a confined space, words like these were no longer mere procedures. They were public humiliation. He drew a deep breath. "The boarding pass is proof enough, you know that." Victor shrugged, arrogance flickering in his expression. "I'm just following protocol. It's possible these were upgraded seats, or perhaps someone used an invalid discount code. We see cases like that quite often." Each word was like a slow-acting poison, filling the air. Lila set her magazine aside, her eyes darkening. "Mr. Halverson, we paid for these seats. There's nothing else to prove." For a brief second, Victor saw the quiet confidence in her eyes and took it as a challenge. He turned, calling Paige over, his voice low but loud enough for them to hear. "Get Captain Greer. I want this resolved before we leave the gate." Paige hesitated. "Right now, sir." "Right now." The cockpit door opened slightly, a faint blue glow spilling out. A man with salt and pepper hair in a captain's uniform stepped into the cabin. Captain Thomas Greer. Lila tightened her grip on Marcus's hand. In her eyes, disappointment and fear intertwined, not fear of embarrassment, but of what she knew was about to happen. This was the very moment she had written about in hundreds of training manuals, the collision between prejudice and authority. Marcus looked straight at the approaching captain, his voice calm to the point of chilling. It seems this flight is about to become a real time test for the very system we helped build. Captain Thomas Greer stepped out of the cockpit with a firm stride, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had commanded thousands of flight hours. But behind the authority of his uniform were eyes that had already judged 2 passengers before they had spoken a single word. "Good evening," he said, his tone blending authority with impatience. "I was told there's a seating issue." Victor Halverson quickly straightened his posture. "Yes, Captain. These 2 passengers are seated in 2A and 2B, but the system shows something different. They couldn't provide valid proof of payment." Marcus met the captain's gaze, his calm so steady it made Greer hesitate for a moment. "Sir, we've already presented our boarding passes, scanned them at the gate, and have email confirmation from Apex Airways. There is no system error, only the way your purser has chosen to look at us." The words landed like a quiet but deliberate strike. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. Lila could feel dozens of eyes on her, the kind of silent audience that watches a scene unfold but dares not intervene. Paige Turner gave a nervous smile, the kind meant to smooth over tension, but now twisted at the edges. "We're just following protocol, ma'am." "Dr. Monroe," Lila interrupted softly, her tone light but sharp. "Not ma'am." The way she said it made the air tremble. Greer raised an eyebrow, briefly thrown off, then regained his commanding tone. "All right, I don't want to turn this into an argument, but if my crew senses anything out of the ordinary, it's my duty to ensure the safety and order of this flight." Marcus heard every word, and something stirred inside him. Part of him, the husband, the man trying to keep calm, wanted to let it go. But the other part, the FAA inspector, the man who knew every line of the Civil Aviation Code, could not. He set his champagne glass down, his eyes turning suddenly cold. "Captain Greer, you're invoking FAA Regulation 91. 3, aren't you? The authority to remove passengers when there's a perceived threat to flight safety." Greer froze, surprised that this man knew exactly which regulation he was about to rely on. Yes. And I believe I'm acting within that authority." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his voice lowering into something that felt like a verdict. "Then make sure you are, because if you misuse that authority, it won't just be a mistake tonight. It will end your career." Lila placed her hand gently over his, whispering, "Marcus, stop." But it was too late. Victor and Paige exchanged a look, a shared sense of being challenged flaring between them. "He's threatening the captain," Victor muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "No," Marcus replied clearly, his voice ringing through the cabin. "I'm warning him." A woman in the row behind gasped. "Oh my God, they haven't done anything. Leave them alone." Greer turned sharply. "Ma'am, please do not interfere with the crew's duties." The air grew thick, as if the oxygen had been sucked from the cabin. Every other sound vanished. Lila opened her phone, pulled up the confirmation email, and spoke with a calmness so precise it chilled the room. Here is the direct payment confirmation from Apex's system. If you have doubts, take a picture. But I will not leave my seat." Greer stared at the glowing screen, reading the names, the transaction code, the matching card number. But pride kept him from acknowledging it. He inhaled sharply. "I don't have time for this. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to ask you to deplane." Marcus rose slowly, his movements controlled, deliberate, like a man preparing to sign a suspension order. "Captain Greer, you should be very careful with that decision, because tonight, the people you're trying to remove from this aircraft are not just passengers." His eyes flashed, not with anger, but with warning. Greer frowned, not fully understanding. Victor smirked. "All right then, if he wants to make this big, call security." Paige nodded, her heart pounding, but her smile triumphant. The cockpit door closed again. The first-class cabin sank into a suffocating silence. No one spoke, but everyone could feel it. What Marcus Cole had just said wasn't a threat. It was the truth, and it was about to bring their entire system crashing down. The cockpit door swung open again. Captain Thomas Greer returned, his shoulders stiff, his voice sharp as a blade gliding across metal. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole, we cannot depart under this level of tension. I must ask you both to leave the aircraft." No introductions, no hesitation, just a sentence delivered like a verdict before the sky had even opened. Lila drew a deep breath, her hand trembling, but her eyes steady and bright. "You're removing 2 legitimate passengers with tickets and confirmed payments, simply because your crew feels we don't belong here?" Greer avoided her gaze. "I'm ensuring safety. My crew has reported that you became confrontational and disruptive. My responsibility is to maintain order and protect all passengers." Marcus rose, his height casting a shadow half a head above Greer. His voice was low, even, every word forged from steel. "No one here has been disruptive, Captain. The only turbulence on this flight is the prejudice coming from your crew." A wave of whispers rippled through the cabin. Some passengers looked down to avoid the tension, while others stared, confused and ashamed. From seat 3G, a young woman suddenly stood up. "They didn't do anything. I'm right here. I saw everything," Victor Halverson barked, cutting her off. "Miss, please sit down. This is an internal crew matter." Paige Turner stood behind him, gripping her notepad so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew things had spun out of control, yet a blind pride still burned inside her, as if she were protecting the standards of first class. Lila glanced around, taking in the averted faces. A chill spread through her chest. Not fear, but pain. This was the industry she had dedicated her life to, making more humane. And now it was tearing her apart from within. Marcus took out his phone, opening the email confirmation and holding it out before Greer. "Here is lawful proof. You can verify the transaction code with your system right now." Greer looked at it, but didn't take the phone. "I don't have system access during boarding. I rely on my crew's reports, and they believe this situation poses a potential disturbance." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You're falsifying a report." Greer's voice hardened. "I'm giving an order." The Polaris cabin went silent. That sentence ended every conversation. In that suffocating stillness, an invisible line was drawn between authority and justice. Lila stood up. She no longer felt the sting of tears, only the hollow ache of watching a world she once believed in collapse before her eyes. "Marcus," she said quietly, "let's go." Marcus looked at his wife, then turned back to Greer. "Are you sure, Captain? I want you to confirm this clearly. You are invoking FAA Regulation 91.3 to remove 2 lawful passengers from this aircraft, based on unverified reports from your subordinates." Greer nodded, though a flicker of doubt crossed his chest. "Yes, I take full responsibility for this decision. That's all." Marcus gave a faint smile, not of anger, but of regret. "Good, because after tonight, you'll need every ounce of that responsibility to defend yourself." He took Lila's hand. Together, they began gathering their belongings, each movement deliberate, not hurried, not angry. They walked down the aisle as if passing through a courtroom. Paige and Victor stood blocking the door, arms crossed. A fleeting look of triumph crossed their faces. Marcus stopped right before them, meeting Victor's eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Halverson. Because of you, I've finally seen with my own eyes what no report could ever capture, how an airline can lose its dignity in just a few minutes." Victor froze. No one said another word. The door opened. Cold air from the jet bridge swept in. The two of them stepped out, their shadows stretching long across the metallic floor, alone but unbroken. As the door sealed shut behind them, Paige exhaled, believing it was over. But in seat 3G, the young woman still stared at the door, realizing she had just witnessed something far worse than a disturbance. On the jet bridge, Lila spoke softly, her voice calm yet edged with steel. "They think they've won." Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "No, they just signed their own indictment." The metal door closed behind them with a deep, final thud, a short, ruthless sound like the end of a sentence. Lila stood motionless in the jet bridge, the white light casting pale reflections across her face. In that moment, she was no longer Dr. Lila Monroe, the leading expert in human factors in aviation. She was simply a woman, pushed out of the very world she had spent her entire life trying to make fairer. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, light but steady. "Let's go." They stepped into the gate area, where rows of empty aluminum seats stretched toward the end of the corridor. Behind the boarding counter, the night shift agent looked up. Ethan Park, young, his face tightening with unease as he saw them return. "Good evening. I thought the flight had already closed," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse from restraint. "We were removed." Ethan frowned. "Removed? For what reason?" "Because our skin color didn't match our ticket price," Lila said softly, her tone like a whisper of wind, sharp as steel. The phone on the counter rang. Ethan answered, nodding several times before turning back to them, avoiding eye contact. "Yes, understood, Captain. I'll take care of it." He hung up, his expression draining of color. "The captain reported you as disruptive. I need to collect your boarding passes and rebook you. The next available first-class seats may take 2 days." Lila gave a thin, brittle laugh that froze the air around them. 2 days? Do you think we'll sit here waiting like beggars?" Ethan stammered. Ma'am, I'm just following protocol. Here's a hotel voucher and meal. Marcus cut him off. Keep them. We won't need it. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen. The cold glow reflected on his face, no longer the face of a patient husband, but of a federal inspector. Lila's heart pounded. She knew exactly what was coming. She had heard him say it before. If the day ever comes when we witness injustice firsthand, you'll know what we have to do. Marcus scrolled to a familiar contact. FAA, duty officer, Southwest region. He pressed call. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. FAA Southwest Duty Office. Agent Patel speaking. Marcus's voice turned precise, cold, authoritative, the tone of a man who had once grounded an entire airline. Agent Patel, this is Inspector Marcus Cole, badge number 0147B. I'm at Houston Airport, gate D12. My wife, Dr. Lila Monroe, and I have just been removed from Apex Airways Flight 112. Boeing 777, tail number N791AP, on unfounded allegations of being disruptive. On the other end, the rapid clatter of typing filled the pause. Confirmed, Mr. Cole. You said the captain was Thomas Greer, correct? Correct. He acted solely on the false verbal report of his crew, purser Victor Halverson and flight attendant Paige Turner, with no verification. This is an act of discrimination, a serious violation of 49 U.S. Code Section 40127, which prohibits any form of bias in air service. Patel was silent for several seconds. To confirm, sir, are you requesting a formal investigation? Marcus replied firmly, without hesitation. Not just requesting. I'm ordering an emergency oversight of Apex Airways' Houston operations. I want the cockpit voice recording preserved from the moment the purser's report was made until cabin closure. Also, secure all Polaris cabin camera data immediately. Understood, Mr. Cole, Patel said, his tone now fully professional. I'll escalate this directly to the regional coordinator's office. Marcus nodded slightly and ended the call. He turned back to Ethan Park. Don't worry, Ethan. No one will blame you. But within the next hour, Apex's Houston station will receive a call. When it comes, I suggest you be ready to receive a federal inspection team. Ethan went pale. You're... Marcus opened his wallet and pulled out a gleaming metal badge. The seal of the Federal Aviation Administration shimmered under the fluorescent light. He set it on the counter, his deep voice steady and resonant. Federal Inspector Marcus Cole. And this is Dr. Lila Monroe, FAA's Chief Human Factors Advisor. We are not passengers who were removed. We are the people who will investigate why this happened. Ethan froze, unable to speak. The air was so thick it felt alive with tension. Lila stepped beside her husband, her eyes carrying both pain and pride. They wanted to test our dignity, Marcus. Now we'll show them what accountability means. Marcus gave a slow nod. Tonight, justice just took flight. And they, the ones who thought they were above it, will soon learn how fast they're about to fall. At Apex Airways' operations center in Dallas, known among employees as The Bridge, the wall clock read 10:47 p.m. Most of the night shift moved in quiet rhythm, the steady tapping of keyboards, the weary murmur of voices over headsets, and the soft blue glow of hundreds of screens displaying flight routes around the world. Then suddenly, an alert flashed across the main control panel. A red box blinked with words almost no one there had ever seen in their entire career. FAA Priority Code. Regulatory Intervention. Houston Station. The entire room froze for several seconds. The lead night coordinator, Carla Ruiz, blinked and reread the message again and again. In 15 years at Apex, she had handled engine malfunctions, drunk passengers, even emergency landings during storms. But she had never seen a federal intervention code appear directly from the FAA system. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning to the systems engineer beside her. "Who's on duty at Houston tonight?" "Gate D12, Flight 112 to Paris." 112? Carla paused mid-sentence. "That's the flight with the passenger removal report, isn't it?" "Yeah, but it was minor, pre-departure disturbance." Carla gripped her headset tighter. "No, Rick, it's not minor anymore." She stood abruptly, striding to the internal phone, and pressed the priority line. "Get me Vice President of In-Flight Services, Alexandra Reed, Level 1 Emergency." Across Dallas, inside a luxury hotel where Apex was hosting its charity gala, Alexandra Reed was raising a glass with investors. At 45, tall and commanding in a white suit, she carried the composed confidence of a woman who had weathered hundreds of crises, never imagining that the worst one was unfolding the very moment she stepped away from her desk. Her smartwatch began vibrating non-stop. Across the screen, a message appeared. Code red. FLT12. FAA. Contact immediate. Alexandra froze for a moment, excused herself from the table, and hurried into the hallway, her voice tight over the phone. "Carla, talk to me. What's happening?" Carla's voice came through, urgent but precise. "We have 2 passengers removed in Houston. Their identities have just been confirmed by the FAA. Alexandra, their Federal Inspector Marcus Cole, and Dr. Lila Monroe." Alexandra's steps faltered. The sharp echo of her heels on marble stopped entirely. "Repeat that." "Marcus Cole, Lila Monroe, FAA Southwest Region. They've opened a discrimination investigation under Section 40127. There's an order to lock all Flight 112 data and temporarily suspend operations at Houston Station." The silence that followed lasted exactly 5 seconds, so heavy it felt as if the air had solidified. Alexandra felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't need to check their files. Everyone in the aviation industry knew those 2 names. Marcus, the veteran inspector who had once forced 2 airlines to rewrite their entire maintenance protocols. Lila, the human factors specialist who had designed the psychological training model used in Apex's own crew development program. "Dear God," Alexandra whispered. "Which crew?" Carla replied. "Captain Thomas Greer, Purser Victor Halverson, Flight Attendant Paige Turner." Alexandra closed her eyes and exhaled sharply. Those 3 just destroyed their careers. 10 minutes later, inside the bridge, the command center erupted like a storm. Orders echoed through the room. "Lock all internal data related to Flight 112. No one is to delete or alter any recordings. Contact Houston immediately. Assemble the legal team." Carla heard the scrape of chairs, the frantic tapping of keys, the rush of footsteps. A young engineer glanced at the screen and whispered, "How bad do you think this is?" Carla answered without turning her head. Bad enough that by tomorrow, the entire aviation industry will be talking about it. High above the earth, 37,000 feet away, Flight 112 was unnervingly calm. The cabin lights had dimmed for the night. Most passengers were asleep, leaving only the soft blue glow over first class. At the front of the cabin, Victor Halverson sipped his coffee, smiling at Paige. "See, I told you. People like that would only know how to argue. The captain was right to remove them. We'll be in Paris right on schedule." Paige gave a tired smile, relieved but uneasy. "I still feel a little sorry for them. They didn't seem like bad people." Victor shrugged. "In this job, instincts are everything. They didn't belong. That's all." What they didn't know was that below them, those words, "didn't belong," were becoming their own verdict. In Dallas, Alexandra Reed tossed her blazer onto the car seat and snapped at the driver. "Houston International Airport. Now. No stops. I need to be there before they land." Her eyes gleamed with hard resolve. In her mind, there was only one thought. If Marcus Cole has officially opened an FAA case, this isn't an incident anymore. This is a national catastrophe. And the storm had just taken flight. 7 in the morning, and the sky over Paris was wrapped in a grey veil of dawn. Apex Airways Flight 112 cut through the clouds, descending slowly as the faint sunlight filtered through the windows and touched the faces of a crew still glowing with quiet pride. People who believed they had followed protocol. Captain Thomas Greer adjusted his tie, his voice steady over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now preparing to land at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Thank you for choosing Apex Airways. We look forward to seeing you again on future flights." In the front cabin, Victor Halverson smiled smugly, finishing his last sip of coffee. Paige Turner stowed the service tray, her tone light. "At least the flight went smoothly. No more trouble." Victor nodded, unaware that the real trouble was waiting just beyond the door, and it had the face of Alexandra Reed. When the aircraft stopped at the gate and the seatbelt sign chimed, passengers began to stand, reaching for their luggage. Victor adjusted his hair and moved to open the cabin door as usual. But the moment the latch clicked, he froze. It wasn't the familiar ground staff waiting outside. Instead, 2 men in black suits with Global Air corporate security badges stood rigidly on either side of the door. And between them stood Alexandra Reed, Vice President of In-Flight Services for Apex Airways. She wore a crisp white suit, her hair neatly tied back, her face colder than the dew, soaked concrete outside. "Keep all passengers on board," she said, her voice even and sharp. "Crew, with me. Now." The private conference room inside the administrative wing of Charles de Gaulle Airport had never felt so cold, not because of the temperature, but because of the tension in the air. Greer, Victor, and Paige sat across from Alexandra and 2 security officers. All 3 fidgeted, confused about what was happening. Alexandra set a thick file on the table and opened it, page by page. Her voice sliced through the silence like a scalpel. "At 9:35 p.m., Houston time, you removed 2 passengers from Flight 112. I want to hear exactly why." Greer exhaled, struggling to sound composed. They became confrontational, undermining the crew's authority. I acted in the interest of safety. Alexandra looked up, her gaze cutting through every layer of pretense. Names of the passengers, Victor jumped in. Marcus Cole, and a woman with him, Lila something. They didn't look like the first-class type. We suspected their tickets were invalid. Alexandra stayed silent for 3 seconds, each one falling like a hammer. Then she spoke slowly. Their full names are Federal Inspector Marcus Cole and Dr. Lila Monroe, FAA Human Factors Specialist. The 2 people you forced off that flight are the very ones who wrote the procedures you just violated. The room fell utterly silent. Greer lurched forward, his face draining of color. Victor opened his mouth, but no words came out. Paige trembled, eyes wide in disbelief. Alexandra turned another page, a faxed document straight from Washington. The FAA has opened a formal investigation. They have ordered the preservation of all cockpit voice recordings, first-class cabin footage, and communication logs. You are being investigated for discrimination, abuse of authority, and violating Regulation 91.3 by making an unjustified decision without verifying evidence. No way, Victor stammered. They didn't say anything. How were we supposed to know? Because you didn't ask, Alexandra snapped. Because you didn't need to. You took one look at them and decided for yourself. That is the crime. Paige began to cry. I was just following the purser's lead. No, Ms. Turner, Alexandra interrupted, her eyes locking on the young woman. You weren't following orders. You were following bias. And now you will face the consequences. Greer lowered his head, gripping his pilot's cap tightly. I didn't know who they were. If I had known, you would have treated them differently. Alexandra pressed, her voice dropping but sharp as ice. And that's exactly the problem, Captain. You respect authority, not humanity. She stood, gathering her documents. You are all suspended from duty indefinitely. Passports, IDs, and crew badges. Hand them over now. Tomorrow morning, you will fly back to the United States in economy class. The FAA's investigation team will be waiting in Washington. Alexandra turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. Her voice was low, yet it struck like thunder. Do you know what the cruelest irony is? The 2 people you looked down on may have been the most remarkable passengers you ever had, but you were never worthy enough to realize it. The door closed behind her, leaving 3 motionless figures in the grey room, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioner. In that moment, Victor Halverson finally understood he hadn't just lost his job. He had lost the very thing the aviation world was built to protect, human dignity. After the confrontation in Paris, the news from Apex headquarters spread faster than any satellite transmission. As Alexandra Reed boarded the emergency flight back to Dallas, she knew the storm awaiting her was no longer a personnel incident, but a full-blown national crisis. Within 24 hours, the FAA had officially launched a comprehensive investigation. An urgent directive was issued across the entire network. All records and data related to Apex Airways Flight 1 to 12 are to be secured immediately, including cockpit voice recordings, passenger cabin footage, and communication logs between the captain and Houston station. In Washington, a closed-door session of the Federal Aviation Committee unfolded in tense silence. The presiding official read out the names of the 2 victims before looking up. Inspector Marcus Cole and Dr. Lila Monroe, We are talking about the very people who wrote the codes our entire aviation system is built on. And they were just humiliated by that very system. The statement silenced the room. In Dallas, every department at Apex worked through the night. The legal division scrambled to find a way to negotiate privately with the FAA. The communications team drafted dozens of public statements, each one torn up moments after printing. There was simply no way to justify the unjustifiable. They had expelled their own auditors. The next morning, inside Apex's emergency boardroom, Alexandra Reed sat across from the company's board of directors. Her face was pale from 36 sleepless hours, yet her voice remained steady and firm. Ladies and gentlemen, we will not hide from this. We will fully cooperate with the FAA. Any attempt at excuses will only make this worse. One director shot back sharply. But what proof do they even have? Alexandra answered without flinching. All of it. Recordings, emails, witness testimony. And more importantly, they have the truth. Meanwhile, in Paris, the 3 crew members sat in the holding room of Global Air Security. Their faces were ashen. Paige Turner wept quietly. I didn't mean to. I was just following orders. Victor Halverson gave a weak laugh, his voice trembling. I followed procedure. Captain Thomas Greer sat motionless, hands clasped tightly, saying nothing. Perhaps because he knew no procedure could save him now. 3 days later, the FAA's public announcement was released. After reviewing all evidence, the Federal Aviation Administration confirms serious discriminatory conduct by the Apex Airways Flight 112 crew. The crew members involved are suspended pending further investigation. Apex Airways faces an initial fine of $2.75 million and is required to restructure its employee training protocols. The news exploded across the media. Apex's stock price dropped 17% in a single morning. Social networks erupted, spreading the hashtag Justice in the Sky. Former passengers began sharing stories of unfair treatment, accounts once forgotten, now reignited by 2 names, Marcus and Lila. Meanwhile, back at the Houston office, Marcus and Lila sat together in silence. The sunset poured through the window, casting a warm glow over the FAA badge resting on the desk, a symbol of justice and integrity they had defended with their own pride. Lila spoke softly. I never thought it would go this far. Marcus replied, his tone calm yet resolute. Sometimes to fix a broken machine, you have to let it stop first. This system is no different. A quiet moment passed. Then he reached for her hand, his voice low but steady. We didn't do this for revenge, Lila. We did it so those who come after us won't have to go through the same. Lila smiled faintly. I know. And maybe that's what true justice really is. In the days following the free fall in Paris, the shockwaves rippled across the global aviation world. The phrase Flight 112 incident dominated headlines from CNN to Aviation Daily. Every column asked the same question. What happens when the enforcers of the law become victims of the very system they protect? At Apex Airways headquarters in Dallas, the atmosphere felt like a courtroom on trial every day. Legal, human resources, and crisis communications departments scrambled to contain the flames. But this time, the fire did not come from engines or fuel. It came from truth. Once the FAA released its preliminary investigation report, there was no saving face. Purser Victor Halverson was terminated immediately. The report stated clearly, displayed explicit racial bias, demonstrated professional incompetence, and caused severe reputational damage to the airline. Flight attendant Paige Turner permanently lost her certification. She left the industry quietly, carrying with her an unspoken verdict. The one who helped ignite the storm of prejudice. Captain Thomas Greer had his pilot's license suspended for a year and was required to complete a requalification course under FAA supervision, a course taught by none other than Inspector Marcus Cole. It was not revenge, but a lesson. During the first session of training, Greer sat in the front row, head bowed, listening to Marcus's voice echo through the microphone. A safe flight requires more than good engines. It requires hearts that see every person as equal, no matter where they sit, what color they are, or what they wear. We can never afford to forget that. The room was silent. Not a cough, not a breath out of place. Months later, Apex Airways signed a consent decree with the FAA, a 112-page document marking a complete corporate overhaul. All 25,000 employees were required to complete a new training program, Empathy in the Sky, designed and taught personally by Dr. Lila Monroe. An anonymous reporting system was launched, allowing any employee to report discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. And for the first time in the airline's history, a new section titled Human First Protocol was added to the company's Standard Operations Manual. The bolded line read, "Before you act, ask yourself, are you responding out of procedure or out of prejudice?" Other airlines began to follow. The FAA called it the Cole-Monroe effect. What began as an internal scandal had become a moral reform movement, reshaping the ethics of American aviation. 6 months later, Marcus and Lila finally boarded a flight to Paris. But this time, they chose a different airline. A young flight attendant smiled when she saw their names on the manifest. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Cole. Wishing you both a wonderful journey. May I offer you 2 glasses of champagne to celebrate?" Lila smiled warmly, her eyes softening. There was no judgment now, no suspicion, only respect, simple and beautiful. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." As the plane lifted off the runway, white clouds drifted peacefully beyond the window. Lila turned to her husband. "I think we're finally flying for real this time." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Yes, and not just us. The whole system is learning to fly again, in every sense." They no longer spoke of that night in Houston. They didn't need to, because that night had already created a new dawn for the skies. In Apex's training center, a metal plaque hung beside the entrance door. Beneath the company logo, engraved in polished steel, it read, "Respect is the true altitude." And that was the legacy Marcus Cole and Lila Monroe left to the world, a reminder that sometimes justice doesn't land with thunder, but with the quiet strength of those who dared to stand and rise higher than anyone ever expected. The night sky may be cold, but justice never sleeps. The story of Marcus Cole and Dr. Lila Monroe is not just about 2 people who were treated unfairly. It is about how they turned humiliation into a torch that illuminated an entire industry. They didn't need anger, They didn't need revenge. They only needed to speak one sentence, and the entire system had to listen. Because true power does not lie in uniforms or titles. It lies in dignity and integrity. And when you have those, no one can ever touch you. From a first-class cabin filled with prejudice, they forced the world to look at itself. They didn't just all change policy, they changed the way people see one another. And sometimes that is the most meaningful journey of all. If this story makes you believe that respect still has the power to heal the skies, then like this video to help spread that message. Share it to remind everyone that justice doesn't need to shout, it only needs to stand firm. And subscribe so you won't miss more true stories where arrogance falls to the ground and humanity rises above the clouds. Because no matter the altitude, every person deserves to be treated as human. Always.